Continuing along with the pamphlet Chesed Le'umim, Kindness of the Nations, page 19, and again this is basically a direct compilation of quotes, of excerpts of different talks that the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach has made. So this one, which I believe we're up to, this is all going to be now, this section is all about tzedakah, which is commonly translated as charity, by the Goyim. This is from a talk of Tafshin Nun Beis 5752, which would correspond to 1992. And we can add, with even more strength and more might, in those matters that bring closer, that hasten the redemption, to bring it about immediately, literally, and that includes the activity with the nations of the world to be involved in tzedakah. In other words, the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach is saying, from amongst the things that people should be involved in to bring about the redemption, the messianic redemption, is to see to it to have the nations of the world be involved in tzedakah.
28b.
28b in Bava Kama.
I think so.
All right.
Yeah,
We'll look it up. And on that, there's a footnote to take note from the discussion in the obligation of Bnei Noach when it comes to tzedakah, and also with regards to the sugya, the discussion in the Talmud, Bava Basra 10b, in the interpretation of the verse, V'chesed lumim chatos, and the kindness of the nations is sin. That at the end over there, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai makes a statement, and that is, just as a korban chatos, which is a sin offering, atones for Yisrael, for the sin of a Jew, so too tzedakah atones for the nations of the world. In other words, even though in the discussion in the Talmud there are different things said, and some of them are derogatory, and some of them are negative, but Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, which is pretty much the conclusion over there, or the end of that discussion, says a very positive statement about the nations of the world, the non-Jewish nations, giving tzedakah. It compares it to a sin offering of a Jew. Now, instead of reading it, the simple reading of the verse, that the kindness of the nations is sin, even their good acts and their kindness is sinful. That's not how Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is interpreting the pasuk. He says that the kindness of the nations is chatos, which is the name of a sin offering of that type of a sacrifice. Next piece is from Tafshin Memhei 5745, 1985. A Jew that had the opportunity years ago to meet in business matters, through business, with an individual that has an important position in Washington or in London or the like. I wonder if we did this part. For some reason, that quote seems very familiar. I think we're up to page 29.
Mm-hmm.
We are. Mm-hmm. All right. What we just did was review. We are now moving on further to page 29, and that's why I thought we're going to conclude tonight, because from 29 to the end it's doable, but if we go back to where I just started, that would take much more time. So, I stand corrected. We are on page 29, and the title here is Siyum, conclusion. Okay. Now, after all the various quotes about the importance of tzedakah, of giving charity when it comes to the non-Jewish world, now we're saying as follows. Titled, Charity and Kindness as we are approaching the final redemption. There are a number of lessons with regards to the service of the Jewish people in bringing about the redemption, and in the manner in which we need to prepare for this final, ultimate messianic redemption. As we currently find ourselves literally at the very, very end of Galus, of exile, the word Goyla, which means exiled, and the redemption is right here. It's about to happen. It's coming right now. So first and foremost, there is the answer, the response to all those that are bewildered and are shocked from the fact that we are making a commotion lately that every single individual Jew needs to be involved and to do and to be active in the redemptive process to bring about redemption immediately now. Now, since these people are open people, they express their bewilderment and their concern verbally. And that is as follows. Here's what they say. When Mashiach is going to come immediately, what's going to be, they ask, with all of the activities and all of their accomplishments and everything that they did and they've accumulated throughout many years of galus, of exile. The businesses that they've established, we're talking about successful Jewish businessmen. The property, the money that they have saved up and collected and gathered. Their friends, their associates, their connections, both the Jewish ones from Bnei Yisrael and the non-Jewish ones from Umay Sa'ilam, nations of the world, that they have connected to, particularly in business, and much more similar to this. So, in other words, at this point, this was said in the summer of 57, 51, 1991. This whole next piece we're going to do now is from that Farbrengen of Achrei Kedoshim, and this is actually a translation of an edited version of that Sicha, so it's quite accurate. And the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach is addressing the worry and the concern of a lot of Jews, and probably even many of his followers of the Lubavitcher Hasidim. So just for a moment to give a little bit of background, this Sicha is coming shortly after the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach made the tremendous commotion and the shocking and breathtaking statement that he made right after Pesach in the spring of 1991. And basically he said, I've done all that I can and now it's up to you, and every one of you has to do everything you possibly can to bring about the redemption. And then he went on to speak week after week after week about the imminence of Mashiach's coming. And although he's been speaking very intently and very passionately and very urgently about Mashiach for 40 years prior to that, from the beginning of his accepting the leadership, from day one, from January of 1951, he's been speaking every time with tremendous intensity and telling us how Mashiach is coming very soon and how we are the generation of the redemption. However, you cannot compare that to the intensity and the thickness of it. It became such a reality in 1991 after the Gulf War, and it became so real that listening to him could become very exciting. But then there were people that it became very scary because they suddenly realized that Mashiach is a reality, and they're worried. What's their worry? Mashiach is going to come. What happens to all of my business and all my property and all of my wealth and everything that I've succeeded in accumulating throughout all these years of Galus? So it seriously is concerning them, and they're afraid. They're afraid to leave everything. You tell a Jew, look, we're going to go to Eretz Yisrael. That's where the Jewish people belong. We're going to have the Holy Temple, and you're going to serve Hashem, and there's going to be godly revelation in the whole world, and be world peace, and everything will be fine. Sounds nice, sounds good, but the guy happens to have a mansion here in America. The guy happens to have businesses, and he needs all of these people. And amongst the people that he's associated with and connected with are non-Jews. So just leave all that and forget about all that. So it's kind of scary. So the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach is addressing that. Now the key is going to be the word goyla, which is the root basically for exile. Usually we call it golus, but the word is goyla, and that's going to be a key component here in this talk. And it's spelled Gimel, Vav, Lamed, Hey. Those 4 letters, which means exile. All right. And the answer to this is as follows. Straightforward, answering the concern and the worry of many of these Jewish people. Nothing to worry about, nothing to be scared. Since the Geula, the redemption, does not mean to nullify the normal conduct of the world, as referred to in the words of the Talmud and the Rambam, min hagoy shel olam, the natural, normal conduct of the world. The good things which were accomplished, according to Torah, in Galus, they will not be nullified or cancelled. To the contrary, Geula, redemption, includes within it all good matters of Goyla, in a way that they're actually elevated to a state of Geula, of redemption. They are reaching their true and their completely perfect level of what they truly, truly are. And that is accomplished by revealing within them the letter Aleph, which symbolizes Alufay Shaloilam, the chief of the world, i.e., God Almighty, meaning the real intention and purpose of every activity in the time of exile becomes revealed then in the redemption, as this is to reveal the honor, the glory of Hashem. In other words, take the word Geula, which is the word for redemption. The Hebrew spelling for that is 5 letters. Gimel, Aleph, Vav, Lamed, Hey. It's the exact same letters. You don't even have to scramble them around. You don't have to switch any of the letters. There's no gematria. It's the same letters. Gimel, Vav, Lamed, Hey is Goyla, exile. Gimel, Aleph, Vav, Lamed, Hey is Geula, redemption. So what you did was you stuck an Aleph in the middle of the word. Placing that Aleph symbolically represents you're just bringing in godliness into the picture. Meaning to say, all of the things that were accomplished in exile, and that includes people's success in business and in materialistic pursuits, all of those things that were done according to Torah. We're not talking about that if a person's employment or their way of life or a person's job is something which is contrary to Torah. That's something else. So that obviously needs to be negated because that should have never been that way. So a person who, for his living, is some type of a con artist or some type of a fraud, whatever, or he's a scam or whatever, the whole that we're not talking about that. And if the guy made a lot of money, which unfortunately there are people like that, by being a professional bank robber, I mean that's what he does. Well, that's not acceptable. But otherwise, if he is doing business and it's according to Torah, meaning he does not have to work on Shabbos, this is a Jew, and he does not obviously steal or even what do you call it? When he is fooling someone, not being dishonest, when he is anyway deceitful in any way, but he's straight in his business. So all those things are good. And the purpose of everything, as long as it's not a sin, as long as it's not against the command of God, the purpose of everything, ultimately, we may not realize that, we may not live our lives like that during exile, but it is ultimately to reveal the honor of God. Everything that he created is for his honor, and our job here is to make this world a place for him. So in the Geula and the redemption, all that will become redeemed and therefore revealed. And therefore, nothing to worry about all of your activities, even in those things which are optional, which are mundane. We're not talking about your mitzvahs that you did. Even things which are business, that a person accomplished, again, according to Torah, in the time of exile. And on the contrary, from here we actually have a lesson, and that is that every businessman or the like needs to search for ways how to reveal in his business, etc., the honor of Hashem, and to utilize his business and his connections to add in Torah and mitzvahs. That's what a businessman should be doing. Take advantage of your business. Now, the Reb Mashiach is not giving us examples here, but there are countless examples. Just for example, just thinking, a person is in an influential position, and he's Jewish. So first of all, for those Jewish people that he associates with, obviously he can encourage them to do mitzvahs, and in the office, instead of just throwing a holiday party or whatever, or a seasonal party, you can make a Hanukkah party for the Jewish people and have the menorah lit, things like that. He could distribute matzah before Passover. For the non-Jewish people, he can utilize his connections to teach them about God and about the observance of Sheva mitzvahs, etc. So a person should try to find ways to use his business as a means for bringing honor to God. And likewise, to publicize and to reveal in the entire world Alufay Shel Olam, the chief of the world, God. And this includes through influencing the nations of the world with regards to the fulfillment of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach as a preparation for, and now he quotes the verse in the end of the book of Ovadia. Ovadia is, of course, the shortest book in the entire Tanakh, total of one chapter. And Ovadia was a ger, he was a convert. And what does he say? The famous words that we say in our prayers every day, V'hoisol Hashem hamelucha. And what will be in the future, in the Messianic times, is to Hashem will be the government. He will rule. So that preparation for that the entire world will be clearly and openly governed by Hashem. So preparing for that is by having the nations of the world and all of the people keeping their Sheva mitzvahs. Based on the above, that Geula, redemption, elevates all the matters of the exile itself. So in other words, it's not a matter of running away or running out of exile, as so many Jews have viewed it for so many centuries. That's what we always thought that ultimately it meant. Galus is bad. Exile means you're thrown out of your land and you're suffering at the hands of the evil, wicked, anti-Semitic Goyim. And Geula means redemption, and we're getting out of the darkness of exile into the light of Geula, and we're changing, we're getting out of there into there. That's not exactly accurate. Obviously, there's, part of that is true, and that's a traditional way to view it, but now what's the more accurate way to view it is that Geula is simply revealing the truth and thereby elevating all of the good things of exile. And that is by making them themselves a dwelling place for God in this world. So much so to the extent that it is particularly and specifically the service in exile which brings about the redemption. It's not that, despite exile, we're going to get the redemption. It's actually through the exile and through the service of exile, during the time of exile, we get to the redemption. So from this is understood that the matters of the world itself and the nations of the world themselves, the non-Jews, also in the time of Galus and of exile, they assist truly, in this service of bringing about the redemption, I think it's fair to say that in this talk, the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach is saying something extremely revolutionary and quite radical, or at least according to traditional Judaism. And that is that I think it's fair to say that up until this point, the traditional approach, the irregular, traditional believing Jew has, is that the Goyim, the non-Jews, all of them basically, are almost a non-entity when it comes to redemption. They're part of the scene, part of the world, and we're in Gullus, and hopefully our neighbors are nice people as opposed to anti-Semitic oppressors. And when Mashiach comes and the redemption happens, so then we leave the situation of Gullus and everything is good and fine. But who has to bring about the redemption? Us Jewish people. Who has to do teshuvah and return to Hashem and cause the redemption to happen? The Jewish people. And what role do the non-Jews play? Basically, zero. Comes along the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach over here and he says, not true. I'm sorry. That is not accurate. Because the redemption, Geula, means making this world a dwelling place for Hashem in the complete, revealed, ultimate state. Well, what's this world? It's not just stones and earth. It's not just oceans and pieces of land. The world is made up of human beings, of people. And therefore, the nations of the world actually are part of the process, and they need to be serving Hashem in a way that's bringing about the redemption. So bringing the redemption is not only a responsibility of the Jewish people, but it's actually the entire world. And we can say that as we currently find ourselves at the very end of exile, and we are very, very close, we're adjacent to the redemption, this assistance from the world and from the nations of the world is becoming more revealed now than it ever was. As we see that in the most recent generations particularly, and more so in most recent times now, and particularly, literally in the last few days. And again, this was said in the spring of 1991. What do we find that's happening in most recent times? In previous generations, most of the Jewish people lived in countries where there were obstacles and there were deterrents, etc. And quoting a pasuk, a verse, where such things should never happen again, to serving Hashem in general. Jewish people, most of the Jews, lived in countries where it was extremely difficult, to say the least, to be able to serve Hashem as a Jew, which is not the case in the most recent generations. Most of the Jewish people live in countries where they are being governed by what's called a Malchus Shel Chesed, a kind government. Mm-hmm. And that is how the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach refers to the United States of America's government. Beginning with this country in which most of the Jewish people of the world currently reside. And he uses an expression, Rav Minyan Ubinyan, which means most of the Jewish people in number, in quantity, and also in building, in structure, institutionally, or in quality, if you will. This is where most of the Jews are. And this country is assisting the Jewish people to reach an inner redemption in their personal service to Hashem, until they will do their job, the Jewish people, and bring about the redemption in the simple, literal sense, not just in a personal way. And then, also the Malchus Shel Chesed, this kind government, will assist the Jewish people to go back to Eretz Yisrael. As the verse says in Isaiah, this is the last chapter in Isaiah 66, it says, Ve'viu es kol acheichem goimer. There's a verse there that describes how the nations of the world are going to bring your brethren, the Jewish people, in a pure vessel, etc. So that's what's going to happen. The United States of America is going to assist in bringing all the Jewish people that are currently residing in America to bring them to Eretz Yisrael. That's what's going to happen real soon. All right, this was said in 1991. All right, we've got to tell this to our new president, you know. And in the last year, this past year, we see how the there's a better word than relationship. How the attitude, thank you, how the attitude of this attitude to the Jewish people has spread out in additional countries as well. Also to that country. Now that country is sort of a code term that was used by many, by the Reb Melech HaMashiach as well, to what they would not dare publicly even say. And it's what we call today, I guess, the former USSR, known as Russia and that whole area. But before the fall of communism, they would just say that country, and everyone knew what that meant behind the Iron Curtain, which is also a term that Reb Melech HaMashiach used a lot. And I believe,
the Iron Curtain?
Yeah,
Really?
And I believe it was Mr. Winston Churchill who coined that term, if I'm not mistaken, the Iron Curtain. So anyhow, so he continues to call it Medina Hahi, that country, even though now, as he says in these talks, it's, you know, perfectly safe and open, etc., as he's going to say. So this attitude of being kind and helpful to the Jewish people has spread not only in the United States, but from the United States, it spread to additional countries such as the former Soviet Union, in which they had, until recently, limitations with regards to the freedom of the Jewish people in their service of keeping Torah and mitzvahs, and also with regards to leaving, to emigrate out of that country. There were tremendous limitations. As we know about all these refuseniks, for so many years, Jews were trying to get out of Russia, and they couldn't. And now, the attitude and the relationship has completely changed. They allow, officially and practically, the government in Russia allows the Jewish people to fulfill Torah and mitzvahs, and they allow the Jewish people to leave that country and to go out without limitations that there used to exist previously. And on the contrary, they actually assist the Jewish people to travel to the Holy Land. And this is, in a microcosmic way, and by way of preparation to the assistance that the nations of the world are going to give the Jewish people to go out of Golus, out of exile, and to go to the Holy Land with a true and complete redemption. So that which Russia is doing in 1991, it's amazing. Within a period of 1 or 2 years, the amount of Jews that went from Russia to Israel is mind-boggling. How many Jews went in 1 year, in 2 years. And it was done with the support and assistance of the Russian government. It's crazy.
Really? Give them plane tickets or?
Whatever they did over there, but they were certainly helping them. And you could look up the details of how many it was, but it was hundreds of thousands in 1 year. I mean, the population used to be, the Jewish population for a very long time used to be something like 3 million Jews in Eretz Yisrael. That's how it basically was for many years. That was true until the early 1990s. And after that, it just, in 1 year, hundreds of thousands. So that is a foretaste and a preparation for the actual redemption. Now, in addition to the direct assistance that the nations of the world are helping the Bnei Yisrael, the Jewish people, there are also matters in which we see how the nations of the world themselves are doing activities of goodness and kindness. So that we spoke until now was the assistance that the nations of the world give the Jews, which is part of the redemption itself also. Now we're going to focus on the nations of the world themselves, what they're doing not to and for the Jews. Their goodness and kindness. They are revealing more that there is, to paraphrase the words of the Midrash, there is a balabayis, a house owner, a boss, to Birazu, to this edifice, to this big building. It's a reference to the Medrash Rabbah and Bereshis, where it describes Avraham Avinu discovering Hashem. And once Avraham came to the recognition that there has to be a creator, and it has to be one who's above and beyond everything and everyone. He created everything and everyone, and he realized it can't be this, can't be that, and he came to that realization. Then Hashem revealed himself to him. So the Midrash uses a parable that the owner of this palace peeked out and, said hello to that person who came to realize that there has to be someone who made this palace and who owns the palace. So that expression there is yesh balabais libirazu. There is a master to this palace. So the nations of the world now are revealing more and more that in fact there is a God. And this is all as a preparation for the fulfillment of the verse that we quoted, V'hoisa laHashem hamulucha. And there will be, for Hashem, the kingship. And this will be, of course, in the true and complete redemption. Not the way that it used to be once. It used to be that it was specifically the Jewish people. And even though, as the verse says, you are the few amongst the nations, and it was the Jew who actually fulfilled the purpose of creation, and that was to make this world a dwelling place for God. And some of the nations of the world behaved in a way of cruelty one towards the other. But what they were primarily involved in, historically speaking, throughout the generations, was their own benefits. What they needed for themselves, what they had to gain for themselves. Whether it was through different selfish things. For example, they would conquer other countries for themselves and the like. That's basically how the world went. So it was really only the Jewish people that were making this world a dwelling place for Hashem, while the rest of the world was involved in self-preservance and so forth. From amongst the revealed ideas that have now been innovated in literally these past few days, which we see how the world and the nations of the world are preparing and assisting in the path for the redemption. And that is in the theme, in the concept of tzedakah and chinuch, charity and education, which are two primary, fundamental things when it comes to yeshuvah shel olam, to making this world a proper inhabited place. As the verse says in Yeshaya, l'sheves yitzara.
Is goyim are primary in tzedakah and chinuch?
Now we see, and I think it's making a reference to President Bush, his
Education
statement.
Day,
Yeah, and that he said he wants to be known as the president, what he wants to go down in history as the president, I think.
No child left behind thing.
Yeah. So it had to do with charity and education.
Interesting.
Yeah.
They're still trying to do that today. There's still stuff going on.
President Bush also saw on a international scale. He saw a new vision for how the world could operate.
Right. And I think the Rebbe Hamshech appreciates that very much, and that's what he's talking about. And he's explaining, why did that happen now?
Like the New World Order?
Something like that, yeah. And he's saying, because this is Mashiach.
And Bush Senior.
Yeah.
Was the one who introduced it
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah. So it says like this. It's known and it's public knowledge in all the newspapers with regards to the events of the most recent days. And again, we're talking over here about around April or May of 91.
I forget if that was when that Gulf War.
The Gulf War was 91.
Yeah, 91, but like in the I forget when it started.
Well,
it was like Desert Shield. And Desert
Well,
Storm.
the attack initially was against Kuwait in the summer of 90. And
Oh,
the
okay.
date, the ultimatum date where they warned him, the big date was January 15th, 91. That was like when the UN told him, if you don't surrender by then, we attack. So it was January 15, 91.
So this is in the middle of all that.
This is after all that.
This is after all? Okay.
After he was defeated. He was defeated on Purim of 91.
Really
Yeah.
interesting.
That's when the war officially ended.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. A story about that too. And I have my passport stamped that I went into Israel January 15th, 91.
Oh,
I
interesting.
went, yeah.
Oh.
I went in then to make a statement. So it was, I went there for 10 days for a visit.
Huh. I remember you had some kind of story.
Yeah. Well, big story. Long story.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Same one.
yeah. So it's known in all the newspapers with regards to the events of these last few days. And that is that in this country, which is based on charity and kindness, as it's known, the United States, the founding fathers, it's about charity and kindness, utilized its strength, its power, to assist and to save people in a far-off place in the world, very far from here, even though, by doing so, the United States did not receive any direct benefit. The citizens of the United States did not have anything to benefit from this act. In other words, it was like a purely an act of
interesting.
chesed.
It was an element of bittul, you would say, maybe.
Well, it was selfless, and they did it lishma. Right, they did it for the sake of doing the right thing.
Interesting. Okay, that's interesting.
What's he talking about? What happened? This country sent many people and soldiers, military people, from its army to assist the refugees in those places, along with food, clothing, and medicine. Instead of using these airplanes for conquering land, in place of that, what did the United States do with all of these airplanes, these military things? And instead of using all of this food and clothing for its own citizens, they used it to save misfortunate people, people that were in a very, very unfortunate situation, and especially small children, from the cold and from the opposite of life. They saved lives. People were going to die, and I forget exactly which country. Is it Bosnia or something or Afghanistan? I don't know. It was something going on there. If you remember, 91. Where did they send the lots of troops to? And in
91.
91. They were in May of 91 or whenever this was.
Well, I mean, that would
Somalia?
Somalia, maybe? I'm not sure.
91. That was still Desert Storm stuff,
No,
wasn't it?
Maybe.
I mean, that would have
You're saying
been
the aftermath
That would
of
have
the
been
war?
Bush. It would have been
Where it was Bush. But,
Senior.
yeah, but where were they sending to?
Somalia was Clinton. Bosnia Herzegovina stuff was Clinton.
I thought Somalia started with Bush's idea after the Gulf War, and then
Maybe, but I would be.
it kind of fell apart though because it was such anarchy.
I would think it would be weird for us to have the Gulf stuff going on and
Well, the
No,
Gulf
but
War
I
was
think it was
over.
after, yeah.
Finished.
Yeah, but just a few months.
Yeah, about 2-3 months later.
People were starving.
Yeah.
I would think that he's talking about Kuwait or Iraq or something like that.
I don't think so.
No.
Probably, you could look it up. And,
Want me to look it up right now?
well, how are you going to look it up? What are you going to look up?
Just look it
This?
up on the internet or
Well,
what May what?
let me. It's 91. Let me see if it would be May. 1 second. Give me a moment. The Hebrew date was the 20th of ER. Yeah, look up May. May of 1991.
Okay, did U.S. conflict May 1991? Timeline of U.S. military operations. Zaire. Evacuated. That's September. Oh, Kurdish people in northern Iraq. In Iraq on May 17th, 91, President Bush stated that the Iraqi repression of the Kurdish people. Repression?
We did he did the no-fly zone.
Had necessitated a limited introduction of U.S. forces into northern Iraq for emergency relief purposes.
Maybe that's what.
Could be.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
he was like, I think he was trying to starve them off or something like that. I do vaguely remember something like that.
And here we see the compassion, the mercy of the citizens of this country when they heard and saw how people are suffering, even though it's not their relatives, and they never had anything to do with these people. They're far away, and there's really nothing in common. They're just people on the planet. They're human beings living on Earth, but they're nothing to do with us. Yet, that aroused in this country to help them. And that is in accordance with the philosophy of this country when it comes to matters of tzedakah, of charity. And that is that we help people throughout the entire world, and we don't wait for them to ask for help. That's the United States policy. That wherever we can, we assist. Sort of like, we take the role of big brother. We feel responsible. The United States people, the citizens, feel a responsibility towards human life. Not just in this country. Similarly, it is known that in the most recent days, the leader of this country came out with a proclamation and a detailed directive with regards to the youth education. And that is in accordance with that he announced in the beginning of his presidency, as soon as he got into office, that his goal is to be remembered as the education president. Because of the activities and the great changes for good, in a good way, that he is going to implement in order to strengthen the education in this country. So now the novelty in these most recent events, amongst other things, is understood simply. And that is, even though by the Jewish people, there's nothing new about this. This approach and this behavior is not new for the Jews, because by them, we always had this behavior according to Torah and mitzvahs, and that would be charity, education, etc. So, of course, the Jew knows about that. But this reveals even more how there is, in fact, a balabayis labirazu, how God is the one who's running the show over here. And this is the true foundation of charity and education. As we spoke a number of times, that the true success in education is dependent in the knowledge and the recognition that the child has that there is a creator to the world and that he runs it. The Rebbe here is talking about what he's spoken about many times, about a moment of silence, how important it is that the child knows and is educated that there is an eye that sees and an ear that hears, and that this world is not a jungle, and that the children in the public school system have to be taught that, without getting into details, without getting into infringing on separation of religion and state. He says, but it's imperative. The only way you're going to truly, properly educate the children and that they're going to grow up to be proper human beings and not criminals is if from a very, very young age they are educated and they are taught that God sees everything. That's it. And he spoke very, very much about the moment of silence to start off in every single public school in the United States, start off in all the states that, and he says, and it doesn't matter, and the school doesn't have to worry about different conflicts, and he says that just like in those schools where the parents send along a lunch with the child, so each parent sends what they see fit to give their kid, whatever food they want, whatever food, for whatever reason, is what they feel their child should have. That's what they pack up in their lunch. Same thing. The child will ask their parents, what am I supposed to think about for those 60 seconds in the morning? And then every home can tell their kid whatever they want. But it's really important that you start off the day with a moment of silence, that they're supposed to think and focus about the Creator.
That's about the best compromise you could do in that situation.
Yeah. So, in this Sikha, the point here is that the nations of the world are active participants in doing things in preparing the way for the Geula, for the redemption.
Did he bring down about Avraham, or was that you speaking?
I just mentioned of the term that he's using about Yesh Balabais Lebirazu is a medrash where that's about Avraham. But now listen to this. Okay, next piece. Stories of tzedakah. The first thing we're quoting now is based on what it says in the Tur. That's the prelude to the Jewish Code of Law. The tremendous impact and power that charity and kindness has, and that is that it can bring close those that are distant, and it can distance those that are close, even throughout generations. What we mean is as follows. Who, like Lot, was close to Avraham? Lot. He was Avraham's nephew. And he hung around with him. He went with him everywhere, wherever they went. And when he was taken as a captive at war, Avraham literally endangered himself to save his blood, to go save his relative. Now Ammon and Moav are his descendants. And when they refused to greet the Jewish people when we were traveling, when the Jews were traveling in the desert on their way about to go into Eretz Yisrael, they would not come out and give us bread and water that we so desperately needed because we left Egypt. So they were distanced from Bnei Yisrael. And therefore, no man from Ammon and Moav is permitted to convert to be Niskayer. Sorry. Even if he converts, he's not allowed to marry a Jewish girl. In other words, he can convert, but can't marry any Jewish girl.
So three
generations? Ammon and Moav, it's forever.
Really?
You're saying about the Mitzri.
Maybe.
The Mitzri is
Maybe
3
that's
generations,
what it
yeah. Ammon and Moav, no man from Ammon could marry a Jewish girl. no woman from, and the women can, but not the men, because they're the ones that are the warriors. They're the ones that are being judged for not coming out to greet us with bread and water. The women didn't do anything wrong. We didn't expect them to do it.
Ruth
So-
is from
right, that was the whole discussion about
Oh,
Ruth.
really? Is it
Yes, there was a question whether she was whether it was legitimate to accept her. Was it permissible? It was a whole big discussion. That's why they wanted to say that King David is questionable, and but then but Yishai is based in. He said no, we have a clear tradition.
Shai is based in?
Yeah, he said we have a clear
Really?
tradition. It's not, On the other hand, Yisroi, Jethro, who was far from the Jewish people, but because he says to his daughters, "Go call him and let him eat bread," he became so close, and he became the father-in-law of Moshe, and he merited to be with the divine presence. In other words, we see the importance of chesed and tzedakah, that someone who is so close can end up being distanced. Lot, a nephew of Avraham, and Avram stuck his neck out for him. But because Ammon and Moav refused to do chesed to the Jewish people, so they're out. And Yisroi, who was so distant, he's Midian. He had nothing to do with, but because he had this tremendous midah, this great character trait of chesed, of kindness. And when the girls came home and they said, "Yeah, some Egyptian man saved us," and he chased away all of the shepherds that were harassing us, and he, gave us, the water, the whole thing. So the father said, "Where is he? Why did you let him there? You're saying some Egyptian man just wandering around. Why didn't you invite him here to have a meal?" And he demanded that they go get him. In that merit. Okay, so that's how the Shulchan Aruch speaks about the importance of chesed in both the positive and the opposite. Okay, now we're going to have story time. In the 10th day of the Jewish month of Elul, in the year Tov Reish Gimel, that would be the year 5,603. Now the year is 5777. That was the year 5603, which would correspond to the secular year of 1843. All right, so at the end of the summer of 1843, the third Rebbe of Chasidus Chabad, known as the Tzemach Tzedek, which actually the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach is named after him.
What? How?
Tzemach Tzedek's name was Menachem Mendel.
Oh, was it?
It was. His name was not Tzemach Tzedek.
Yeah, right.
That's the name of the book that he...
I just always refer to him as Thomas.
Everybody refers to him as such. Yes. That's the name of the responsa of his legal rulings. Tzemach Tzedek, which the gematria of Tzemach is Menachem, and the gematria of Tzedek is Mendel.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
What's the Gemara? How do you spell Heva?
As for what?
Eve?
8, 6, 5. What are you up to?
14. No, 19. Never mind.
Okay.
Sorry.
Now, what happened? Here's the following story. The Tzemach Tzedek was returning from the city of Petersburg, after he had to spend time there for a number of months. Right? Some legal stuff, things that he was trying to take care of. And now he's on his way back home to the tiny little famous village called Lubavitch. He's on his way from the big city of Petersburg back home to Lubavitch. Along with the Rebbe were 30 wagons of Hasidim, of his followers, that were escorting him from city to city. In the village near the townlet of Lubavitch, Goyim from 3 villages were waiting there. They gathered, these Russian, Ukrainian Goyim,
For good.
and they decided that they are going to greet the Rebbe with great honor. So they made a whole big gathering from three villages and came together. They made a special gate for him, made out of branches of trees, and they stood in rows, in a row, to welcome him and to greet him. When the wagon of the Rebbe, of the Tzemach Tzedek, came to the gate, which was crowned with beautiful flowers, it was this whole big gate of branches, and they put all these flowers on it. And everybody was standing there at attention, with tremendous honor. His wagon stopped. 3 Goyim, representatives of these 3 villages, gave the Rebbe bread and salt. They came and they presented him with bread and salt.
Whoa, this is interesting.
The Rebbe accepted the bread and salt, and he gave them 20 silver ruble, 20 ruble of silver,
Oh, wow.
to make a feast for all the 3 villages that participated in this. So to show his gratitude, he is paying them a lot of money, and he's sponsoring a feast for the Goyim of these 3 villages.
Whoa, that's a big deal.
Yeah, that's one story.
That's a wonderful story.
Yes, it is.
I need to get a copy of that.
Okay, that story is written in a letter from the Rebbe Rayatz, the 6th Rebbe, in Igros Kodesh, if you want to get the whole set.
I think I might actually have. Is it just a small set like this?
Well, the whole set is about 16 books.
Oh, you know what? I
It's-
think it's per year or something.
It's by the years. It's volume 3. I mean, I have the set at home, so all you have to do is give you a
Get a
photocopy
copy.
of this letter. Yeah, it's volume 3 of the Rebbe Rayatz's Igros Kodesh.
Volume 3, okay.
Yeah,
And
page.
page or anything?
Yes,
Like
page 405, 406.
that? Great. There's a lot of talk like, oh, you know, the Alter Rebbe, he didn't really like non-Jews or something, you know.
Really? Oh, because what he
Because
wrote
of
for
all,
college.
yeah, Charles, yeah.
Okay. Next story.
I try to rectify that, like, oh my goodness. So,
Next story. When the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe, that would be the Rebbe Rayatz, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, when he was in the very, very difficult incarceration, in the year Prozos, Tafresh Pei Zayin, which would correspond to 1927, in one of the cells, one of the very difficult cells that he was in there in the USSR, he met over there one of the employees in the prison, one of the jail people that was there, a goy, that in earlier years previously he lived in a village called Gusin, which was not too far from Lubavitch, from his town. Okay, so the prisoner, the Rebbe, is meeting up over here with a guy who works in the jail that is originally or lived way back near Lubavitch. As we see in the diary of the arrest, the Rebbe Rayatz kept a very, very detailed, amazing diary. So the Rebbe knew many Jews from that place. However, with the landowners and the non-Jewish citizens of those villages, he didn't know them because he had nothing to do with them. So the Jews from that place he was familiar with. Chimke, the Rebbe asks this person as they're talking, "Where are you from?" This is what the guy asks the Rebbe. He asks him, "Where are you from?" The Rebbe Rayatz answered him, "I'm from a small little townlet. I don't know if you've even ever heard of it. It's called Lubavitch." And Chimke says, "Lubavitch? Certainly I know that city. Yet from when I was a youngster, a small child, there was a big marketplace there and 2 synagogues. In that city, there was a family of a righteous holy man, of a tzaddik. And this guy, Chimke,
This is the guy talking, the non-Jewish
yeah,
guy?
this guy, Chimke, is telling the Rebbe about the Rebbe's family. He's describing this holy family. They lived in a large courtyard, which was near the marketplace. In that courtyard, there was a well, a water well. And whenever I used to come with my father to the market, and that was quite often, I used to go there to drink water from that well. Not only did we drink from there, from the cold water, but we also gave our horses to drink. There was a special gate to bring the livestock and the animals through, in order not to dirty the main entrance where everyone else, where the people were. Many used to come to this courtyard to drink. Now, even though the Rebbe, this righteous person, didn't know them at all, and according to the laws of nature, probably he would never know who they are. But as mentioned, to his personal courtyard, there was free approach, very comfortable for Jews and non-Jews alike. The priest, by the way, would not allow the farmers or the peasants to use the wellspring in his courtyard.
Oh,
So that's the memory
Wow.
that this guy has, that he's telling the Rebbe Rayatz.
That's funny.
Yeah.
It's very powerful.
Not realizing who he's talking to.
Yeah.
This is probably going back
amazing.
to the Rebbe Ratz's father, the Rebbe Rashab.
So when he was a child,
Yeah.
you might even saw the guy. That's a really good story. That's really great.
And that is also told by the Rebbe Rayatz in Lekutei Diburim. All right, now we have another story.
No, it was in the same story as in Lukutei Deburim?
This was in Lekutei Diburim, the second story.
Oh, okay.
This one is also from Lekutei Diburim now, which is from the Rebbe Rayatz.
Okay.
The city of Bachekov, which is in the,
Does it say what page that? Sorry.
well, that one, it says where it is in the Hebrew translated edition. I have the regular original Yiddish one.
Oh.
So in the Hebrew one, it's volume 3-4, which are together, page 839, 840, and in volume 5, page 1416.
Oh, page 3 and 4 is
In 3 and 4, it's page 839, 840.
okay.
In volume 5, it's page 1416.
Now, why would it be in volume 5?
I'm not sure.
14, 16?
Yeah.
14 through 16?
1416. No, 1416.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Thank you.
Now, this following story is in Lekutei Diburim, volume 3, page 638. In the city of Bachekov, which was in the county, I guess that would be the right word, of Vitebsk, which belonged to a certain Graf. Graf is a landowner. I guess that's what you call it. And the city and many cities and in the surrounding area for a really big chunk of land belonged to him as an inheritance that he got from, going back to his father and further back. So he owned a big piece of land here, lots of cities. The Graf had a palace, his own palace, with many buildings for having people and having a whole neighborhood for all of his supervisors and managers and all that lived there. And they basically managed all of his tremendous property. Amongst the buildings, there was also a Catholic church. There was a priest and a group of assistants that were part of and associated with this church. The Graf was a good man, and all of his days, his whole life, he gave the opportunity for the Jewish people to have a respectable livelihood, to earn a respectable livelihood. The poor Jews of Batshekov, so for them, he canceled paying the land taxes. He didn't charge them any tax of the land because they were poor. So too, he instructed to give free, grazing for their animals and their goats of the Rav, the rabbi, of the Shoichet, of the ritual slaughterer, for the Chazanim, the cantors, for the Melamdim, the school teachers. Almost for all the Jews of the city, they got a lot of livelihood. More or less, everybody basically got their income from the Graf's property, one way or another. So he was really, really good to the Jews. The Graf, his entire life, was a weak person physically. His health was weak. And very often, he was actually physically ill. And he was healed by a doctor, a big doctor. His name was Heibenthal from Vitebsk. When the Graf got old, so his weakness became even more, and he then went to be healed under the care of a very famous doctor, Bartenson. When his weakness was really, really overpowering him, so he basically gave over all the matters of his estate to his main manager, which was an anti-Semite. At that time, there arrived in this place a priest that was an anti-Semite. And under the influence of the new priest, this manager, the main manager, he distanced the Jews from the Graf's property. So now by the Jews that were poor, they began collecting and demanding land taxes. By the Rav, the rabbi, and the school teachers, etc., they began charging them for the grazing of their animals, and the situation of the Jewish people's livelihood became completely difficult and was going from being a good situation to becoming a very difficult one. For about 2 years, this is how the situation was going. For about 2 years. Most of the Jews of Bachekov were those that were close to the fourth Lubavitcher Rebbe, that's the Rebbe Maharash. So they were most of them were basically more or less Lubavitchers. And they were followers of the Rebbe Maharash, which is the fourth Rebbe. They were quiet people. They used to come to Lubavitch for one of the holidays or for a Shabbos. They used to hear the Chassidus, the discourse that the Rebbe would deliver. They would go into Yechidus to have a private audience with the Rebbe. They would ask for a blessing from the Rebbe for children, health, life, and sustenance for livelihood. They would go back home with trust in the Creator that the blessing of the tzaddik will be fulfilled. However, to speak with the Rebbe about their difficulty that they're having in their livelihood and about the priest, which is an extreme Jew hater, and about the main manager that is an anti-Semite, no one dared bring it up. They just didn't do that. They asked for a bracha, for a blessing, but no one dared spell out what their problem and what the difficulty and what the challenges are actually. Amongst the Jewish families, that even their parents and grandparents were there for many years, there was a business connection with the Graf's property. So it was one person whose name was Reb Shmuel, the son of Reb Isaac. And he was normally called Munye or Mulia Isaacs. That was his nickname in Yiddish amongst the friends. This Reb Shmuel was from those strong Hasidim, and he was very bound up and attached to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He was an honorable Jew, and he had a tremendous amount of money, a great deal of livelihood. He had a very good name as a very honest business person in the whole area. He was a Jew that always was very hospitable, had lots of guests, and he gave a lot of tzedakah. He also knew how to learn very well, and he also understood Chassidus. So all around, he was a very well-to-do in all areas. Reb Shmuel himself was from those Jews that were connected to the business with the Graf's property. On the festival of Shavuos in the year Tafresh Mem, 1880, Reb Shmuel was in Lubavitch. He came for Shavuos to go to his Rebbe. When he was in Yechidus, when he had a private audience with the Rebbe, so the Rebbe Maharash, asked Reb Shmuel about the situation of his earnings, his livelihood in the city. Reb Shmuel told him that it's now a number of years that the livelihood of the Jews was taken away from them. And he told the Rebbe the reason for this, that the old Graf has aged and is extremely ill, and the livelihood of the Jews is going from bad to worse from day to day, and the Jews of the city and the Jews of the surrounding area are extremely worried about the situation. The Rebbe tells him, I know Professor Bartenson told me that the Graf is in a very dangerous situation. His life is in danger. The old sick Graf. The Rebbe complained very harshly and very sternly to Reb Shmuel for why no one told him all this time about the situation and how there was such a change for the Jews with the Graf's estate. The Rebbe went into deep thought, And after a while, the Rebbe says to Reb Shmuel as follows. Travel home, go home. When you will see the graph for the first time, tell him that I have commanded you to give over to him as follows. I know that he's in a very dangerous situation and that the doctors have despaired and given up hope from his life. If he will help the Jews of Bachekov and the surrounding areas, the villages and the whole area, with inns, hotels, which are on his property, then the Creator of the world will grant for every Jewish family that is going to be assisted because of him an extra month of life and health. They'll get one more month of life and health per Jewish family he helps. When Reb Shmuel came home, after a few days he went to visit the Graf's estate. And he wanted to see the Graf. But it was impossible. They didn't let anybody see the Graf. He was not very alive, and no one was allowed in. This was on a summer day, a clear summer day, and it was really good weather. The doctor had instructed that they should, bind up the horses when you tie the horses to the wagon?
Hitch.
What?
Hitch.
They should hitch that. They should hitch the horses and take the Graf while he's lying on his bed for a
Constitution.
not a walk,
Ride.
for a ride in the forest. Okay, because the weather was so good, and it would be good for his health. So while he's on the bed, take the bed, put it on the wagon, and they should ride him to the forest. When they took the Graf, carried him out of his house to place him on the wagon, Reb Shmuel was standing on the side, and he saw how they're carrying this old Graf, a broken man. It caused him very deep pain and discomfort seeing the Graf in such a state. The Graf noticed Reb Shmuel, the Jew, and he said that he wants Reb Shmuel to join him on his ride to the forest. The Graf knew that Reb Shmuel was a chassid who was really bound to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. When Reb Shmuel sat in the wagon, he immediately gave over to the Graf the words that the Rebbe told him to tell the Graf. The Graf told Reb Shmuel to arrange a list of all the Jewish families that live in Bachenkov and that are able to get their livelihood from his estate. And then he will either himself or through an agent make a list of all of the villages, all of the inns, all of the rivers which are owned by the Graf himself, and nobody should know about this. He told him, make this list. In the list that Reb Shmuel gave the Graf, there were over 160 Jewish families of Bachenkov, and then several other dozens of families in the surrounding area. The Jews now, once again, had a livelihood, and this old Graf got healthy, had a recovery. Reb Shmuel was very appreciated in the estate of the Graf. Amongst the rest of the plants in the garden of the Graf also grew lulavim and beautiful hadassim that the Jews need for sukkahs. So lulav tree is a type of a palm tree.
Really?
Sure. Lulav?
In Russia?
Yeah.
Maybe.
This is the graph. And hadassim, which are the myrtles.
And those are one of those isn't Hadassim considered to be from Chesed, the kind people or something like that?
Yeah. And from the year Tafresh Mem Aleph, which would be roughly 1881, Rabbi Shmuel used to send every year to the Rebbe a lulav and hadassim from the garden of the Graf.
Whoa.
In the year Tafresh Nun Dalid, which would be about 1893 or 94, Rabbi Shmuel said the above-mentioned whole story, and then he concluded. The Graf is extremely old. Since the summer of Tafresh Mem of 1880, when this part of the story happened, till today, which is a period of 14 years,
Yeah.
the Graf was healthy. He never got sick, not even once. A week ago, the Graf felt weak. He sent a message to call me, and he told me to go to Lubavitch, to go to the Oihel of the Rebbe, because in the interim, the Rebbe Maharash passed away, because the Rebbe Maharash passed away in Tafresh Mem Gimel. So initially the story was Tafresh Mem, 1880. So it was 2.5 years later or so that the Rebbe Maharash passed away. But the Graf is still living it out, 14 years. So the Graf told Reb
12
Shmuel,
divided by 160. Yeah, he doesn't have much longer.
so 14 years.
Yeah.
So the Graf told him to go to Lubavitch, to the oil.
Yeah, but 12 months divided by the 160 is
Oh.
about 14 years.
Yeah, and he told him, give over that I'm feeling weak. And according to the calculation of the months, 1 month per Jewish family, I still have another year and 7 months of life. And that the Rebbe should keep his promise. So that's the story. So that's how Reb Shmuel then,
We still had a couple dozen families in the villages,
yeah,
in addition to the 160.
yeah, so it
Yeah.
worked out. He had another year and 7 months left. So that's the story. So that's just, I guess, to bring out the kindness of a very prestigious, important, wealthy guy. That how he dealt kindly. All right. Now this is this next part is just a little bit, and it's called not supplement. What do you call it? Appendix. Yes. What's an appendix? Besides the human body. What's an appendix?
Additional things that need to be said but aren't part of the
Okay.
proper.
I guess. This is the appendix.
ideas,
Okay.
Whatever you want to call it.
Fine. So we got a few things here. Number one, the prohibition of avodah zarah, of idolatry, and the belief in one God. Yeah, okay, this is just going to give, I guess I just want to stick in over here about the Sheva Mitzvahs. Every human being is required to believe in the existence of the creator of the world, the one and only. He created the entire world and he created man. He knows all the deeds and all the thoughts of every living being, and he supervises over them. And he judges every person according to his deeds. This one and only God is the only one that it is appropriate to worship and to pray to. Practically speaking, what is this mitzvah? The absolute prohibition of bowing down or worshiping idols of any type. This prohibition includes also believing in any other gods or in any other, or attributing any other existence outside of the creator of the world. You're not allowed to worship that. Next, the prohibition of blasphemy. Man is required to show respect to the Creator, who gave him life and gives the entire world its life. Practically speaking, this mitzvah is the prohibition against cursing, God forbid, God, or to refer to him with any type of disrespectful reference or anything. Next, the prohibition against murder and respect of human life. Man was created b'tselem boiroi, in the image of his Creator. Man's life is a gift from above, and man has no permission, no right to take it away. You need to respect and to encourage and to do what you can to prolong the existence of individual life and of collectively, of human race, which was given by the Creator in order to settle and inhabit the world, the land. Practically speaking, what does this mitzvah mean? The absolute prohibition for murder, killing a person. And this applies even if it's to an unborn fetus inside the mother's womb. One who kills one person is considered as if they have destroyed an entire world, and as if they have, as it were, hurt the Creator, because, as we said, man was created in the Creator's image. Next, the prohibition against adultery, and this would include respect for family life. The Creator first created man and woman as one body, one unit, and afterwards he separated them into two, which need each other in order to reach their perfection, their completeness. Married life and the laws associated with marriage are therefore a basis for the existence of the humankind and for the fulfillment of family and of community. This is expressed also by keeping the more moral modesty and discreetness when it comes to family matters. Practically speaking, what does this mitzvah mean? The prohibition against adultery. It is forbidden for anyone to have marital relations amongst relatives that are close relatives, such as brother and sister. It is forbidden for a man to have relations with a woman who's married to someone else. It is forbidden for men to have relations with men or with animals. So that would be called homosexuality or what's the word?
Bestiality.
Bestiality. Next, the prohibition against stealing, and that would be honoring the other person's property. God gave every individual ownership over his money and property, and no one has the right or permission to take it away from him. Practically speaking, this mitzvah means the absolute prohibition against stealing or robbing, thievery, in any form, to take someone else's property out of their domain by either trickery, deceit, or by force, or in any illegal way. This includes also withholding payment of a worker. This includes the prohibition against kidnapping, young or old. You need to be sensitive to someone else's money or property. And this gives us a feeling of acts of charity and kindness and to help the other person in whatever they need. Next, the prohibition against eating a limb off of a live animal and to be careful not to harm, not to hurt, not to pain living creatures. God created the world, and in the world he made all sorts of living creatures. We need to honor, respect them. In contrast to the world of vegetation, which is constantly becoming renewed, hurting living creatures is irreversible. Although the Torah does not negate or forbid eating meat, but it puts clear guidelines and limitations of how a person can benefit from a living creature for his needs. Practically speaking, this mitzvah means prohibition against eating a limb or ripping a limb off of a living animal while it's still alive. This mitzvah obligates us not to be in English when you're desensitized, when you're
Indiscriminately
no,
cruel?
when you don't care, you don't feel
Apathetic?
apathetic. Not to be apathetic even for the pain of a living animal. And this strengthens within us our obligation to be vigil to the pain of another person and not to harm him and to help him go out of his situation. If we're supposed to care about animals, certainly about another person, another human being. Finally, appointing of judges to make a judicial system. In order that all of the above-mentioned laws should be able to be kept in a beautiful, proper way, well, we have to establish in every city or in every county, every area, courts of law, and to appoint judges that will judge according to these above-mentioned 6 mitzvahs. Now, it's within the authority of the judge. They have the right and the authority to punish people that transgress these mitzvahs. We cannot allow a situation in which there is no legal system which is based on the laws of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach.
I'm sorry, what?
We can't allow there to be a situation where there isn't some kind of enforcement of the law of keeping these 7 mitzvahs. Anyone who has a claim needs to go to these judges and to follow their verdict and their ruling. In this list that we just went through, we have over here the generalizations which are the basis for the 7 mitzvahs. They have many details which one needs to know. More details can be found in the Rambam's Yad HaChazaka, the Mishnah Torah, in the book of Judges, Laws of Kings, chapters 9 and 10, and likewise in the Encyclopedia Talmudis, under the section called Ben Noach. Likewise, besides for these 7, there are other mitzvahs which the nations of the world are obligated in, coming from the authority of the Torah of Moshe, or because it's a custom that they took upon themselves. And the goal of all of this is Yeshuvah Shel Olam, to make this world a proper place. And the prohibition against doing anything which would contradict or go against this goal. Amongst these other mitzvahs that we can list are things such as honoring father and mother, the mitzvah of tzedakah, and others. And with that, we conclude a booklet called Chesed Le'umim, Kindness of the Nations. So it's a worthwhile compilation to go through. All right. What I think that brings us to now, if we're going to succeed in going through it, I don't think we'll start this week, but just by way of introduction, there lived a Jew who was a brilliant scholar. His name was Reb Menachem Mendel Kasher. I believe he was a chassid of Gur, or as they pronounce it, a Gerer chassid, which is a Polish branch of Hasidim. They're primarily in Eretz Yisrael. And this Rabbi Kasher took upon himself a tremendous, tremendous undertaking. His project that he spearheaded, and pretty much, at first at least, single-handedly was doing, is an amazing work. He wanted to compile all of the commentaries, all of the tradition, I should say, of the oral Torah. That would include Mishnah, Gemara, and all of the scattered midrashim, Sifra, Sifrei, places in the Zohar, Brises, Toseftas. This basically different terms for different parts of the oral law that were written. The first one to write Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral law, is Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, but after that, commentaries and explanations of his Mishnah were written. So what Rabbi Kasher wanted to do was to go through the entire 5 books of Moses, the whole Chumash, the Bible, and verse by verse bring down on the written law in order, bring down everything, all the statements that are in the oral law. And then he has many, many long footnotes on that. So it's an amazing work, especially since he started this back in the 1950s, or maybe even earlier. Sorry, maybe 1940s. And at that time, as everybody knows, you didn't have, Google and all these different things in the internet and computer in 1940s. And each volume could be one Torah portion, just one parsha. Some of them may contain 2. And he did not get to finish the whole thing. I think he got somewhere into the middle of the book of Bamidbar. And in the volume on the book of Mishpatim, which Parshas Mishpatim, which is Exodus in the book of Shmois, chapter 21 and on, which speaks about lots of civil laws for the Jew. So in that volume of Mishpatim, he has Miluim, which would be like the supplements. And he has, in this particular volume, 23 different essays. 23 essays. And the first of the 23 is laws of damage, civil laws between one person and another person, of Bnei Noach prior to the giving of the Torah. Now, it's going to be a lot of technical stuff. And I'm just giving a heads up, we may not really make it through. We can try, and we can go for it, but it's only about 10 pages of fine print in Hebrew with lots of abbreviations and references. Well, it's 16 sides.
Be interesting.
Um,
That's the din that Abraham had would be pre-Matan Torah B'nai Noach law.
Well, he'll bring down sources for whatever he's got to say, and what can I tell you? I just thought it would be interesting because this is directly discussing Bnei Noach. So I think we'll try it. Now he's going to make references here to things that he says in the actual book itself, because this is a supplement to that. But this is what he's going to be discussing. So that's what we're going to do. Imir Tzeh Hashem next week.
Okay.
So that just saves us the introduction for next week.